unprecedented. The legislation itself was unprecedented. Never before in our nation's history had we been required to buy something in order to be a good citizen. There had been 6 other times in our nation's history where somebody or some Congress had tried to pass national health care, and they never did it by trying to require us to purchase health insurance. So the states said, we're not going to put up with this. We think this is an encroachment on our citizens' constitutional rights and on our sovereignty as states. And we're not going to put up with it. And they said, federal government, you have forgotten. You have forgotten that you are a government of limited powers. The founding fathers, the greatest men and women in the history of this world, devised a government that required government to be limited because they were scared of a strong and overbearing central government. They had just broken off from the worst kind of strong centralized government called King George. And they said, we don't want that again. And so if we're going to have a constitution, or if we're going to have a federal government, we're going to write it down so that the Constitution is never forgotten. And what's happened in this country is the Constitution's been forgotten. And so what the state said was, we're not going to put up with this. We're going to remind the federal government. And so we sued. And you may recall that the governor of Nevada at the time asked our attorney general, I think that the state of Nevada's interests are at issue. Go join that lawsuit. And you remember what she said? She said no. Even though Nevada law required her, when the governor directed to join or defend a lawsuit to do just that, she said no. So the governor then asked if there were any private attorneys who would be willing to consider that, and he interviewed different attorneys, and he asked us to get involved, and we've been involved, and it's been a thrill ever since, because this is the constitutional question of our day. It is transforming, ladies and gentlemen. It is the constitutional question of the day. There's the old Chinese curse or proverb, whichever you like, may you live in interesting times. We do. This is unprecedented times. We stand at the crossroads. If the federal government, if this law is upheld, and the federal government can require you and I to buy a product, it's a brave new world. We have never been in a situation like that before, where you could be sitting in your home, on your couch, not doing anything, and the federal government reaches out to you and says, you have to buy something, otherwise we're going to fine you, otherwise the IRS is going to come after you, otherwise all those 1,600 agents that were included within this law are going to come find you. 16,000, sorry, 16,000, very good. Never happened before. So we sued, and we got Judge Vinson in Pensacola, Florida. When you go home tonight and you say your prayers, you thank the good Lord for Judge Vinson. And let me tell you why. We walk into that courtroom on the hearing as to whether or not there's a whole lot of things going on. Let me just cut to the chase. We go into the courtroom of Judge Vinson's courthouse in Pensacola, Florida, a big, beautiful southern courthouse. And I knew we would be just fine when I walked in and I saw all the murals on the wall. And the biggest mural of them all was the famous mural of the Founding Fathers signing the Constitution. And he reminded us that the day we were there arguing whether or not this law was constitutional or not was Constitutional Day. And it was Constitutional Week. And the issues involved in this case were precedential, were unprecedented, and would be so far-reaching and important that it was far beyond healthcare. It was whether or not our system of government that was established by the Founding Fathers would continue to survive. And it is about, ladies and gentlemen, why it is we as a country thrive as a people when across the border to our south is a country that's virtually a third world country. It shares a border with Texas, or a river with Texas. Why is it in Texas where there's prosperity and freedoms, and across the border there's not? Why? Because of our system of government. Why is it in Israel, who shares a border with Egypt, there's prosperity and opportunities and freedom, when in Egypt people are trying to live on $2 a week? It's their system of government, and that's what's at stake. It's not about health care. As much as we want to debate that, it's not a debate. But this lawsuit's about whether or not our system of government is going to survive. And Judge Vinson said that. And after we argued, and you heard all the evidence, and all the states that presented it, there was just sort of this historical nature to it. We got 26 states lined up on one side of the courtroom, and we got about 8 or 10 lawyers from the Department of Justice on the other side of the courtroom, and you're standing up, and you're arguing, and the judge is there, and there's the American flag, and there's reporters in the galley. You know something historical is happening. And Judge Vinson eventually would say this, and I think this crowd, if any crowd, would appreciate it. He ultimately said, this is unconstitutional. This law is unconstitutional, and I'm striking it down. And And let me tell you what he said, because I know my time's about up. But let me tell you what he said, and you'll love what he said. And that's what I'm telling you. When you go home tonight, thank the good Lord for Judge Vinson in Pensacola, Florida. Because he said this in a well-reasoned 78-page opinion. That's going to go to the Supreme Court. I'll tell you whether we're going to win or not in just one second. This is what Judge Vinson said. He said, it would be strange indeed if a country that began in part with a rebellion against the tax on imported teas would construct a system of government that required its citizens to buy tea in the first place. That is not what our founding fathers did. They didn't devise a system of government that requires to buy anything. What they devised was the greatest, most ingenious, most prosperous, most liberty-driven system of government the world's ever known. We've been the greatest country in this world, and there are those who want to send us back to Europe and a European centralized system of government that was rejected by our founding fathers. And that's what's at issue here. And we're now in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. We'll be there. The 11th Circuit has said we're going to expedite the briefing on that. We'll be arguing in front of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in June. We'll be before the U.S. Supreme Court in the fall. And the U.S. Supreme Court will ultimately decide this case. The federal government has done everything they can to drag their feet. They don't want this case before the U.S. Supreme Court. They want somebody to die, is what they want to have happen. Let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to run that 5-4. Alito and Thomas and Justice Scalia will all join with us, and then the swing votes will be Justice Kennedy. Will win at 5-4, and this country will once again be a blessed place to live. God bless you all. God bless the Tea Party, the Republican Party. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.